So, hey guys, Peter, that was awesome. We got 35 minutes and I still want to get to your guys like deck questions and private money questions. So, we're going to move on a little bit. Sound good? Yep. So always lean out the property. That was a beautiful 90 minutes, guys. I just hope that's the lesson you learn. So now we're going to move on to kind of talking some more private money, from your guys' takeaway from the private money workshop. But, I'm going to who here considers themselves introverts and who here is a little nervous about raising private money? Okay. So I know at Cash Flow Heaven, I was just like, oh man, I'm teaching a bunch of introverts how to sell. How am I going to do that? Seek and you shall find. So I think I have read one of the greatest books ever about selling as an introvert. It made me a better salesperson. I think you're going to find this very interesting. And I think this will help you guys raise some private money. So here's what I do on Saturdays. I do leg lifts. And I love leg day, but I can really get in some deep thinking. So I'm in Daily Wire. They have Jordan Peterson's last tour, and he's always talking about the power of storytelling. And that, quite frankly, this is outside the scope of this call, and it's a little long, but we see the world in stories. And so, how do you know you see the world in stories? Like, here's a great example. Joseph Campbell, this book, Hero with a Thousand Faces. We've talked about it before, but there's a story archetype to everything. Generally, it's the hero's journey, and all of Hollywood, all TV, all Netflix, all movies are based off this hero's journey archetype, and that stories compel people, and that generally you see the whole world from a story. And Peterson's take is create the story that you want and always keep the end in mind, like Stephen Covey would say. But we can all agree that we all concur that storytelling is incredibly powerful. And so the next question is, when you guys are proposing private money, what do you think is what actually gets people to move? Logic or emotion?
Definitely emotion.
Emotion, right? So it's like we're stuck. All right, we understand this is a great deal. We understand the features and benefits, X and O. So how do we tap in? I'm going backwards. Sorry. How do we tap into this emotion? And then we learned this from Russell Brunson, but people act and change based off emotion. They just use logic to justify the action. And Ron Burgundy, he's just honest. He's a glass case of emotion, just like the rest of us. And I had self-limiting beliefs around this. I'm like, I'm a man and I don't have emotions and I use logic and reason to do everything I do. It's completely false. Everything's based off emotions and you use logic to justify it. And the greatest myth ever is that you use reason and logic to move. It's just not true. Like what we learned in the Enlightenment, like these guys were saying, hey, everything's done by reason and logic. That's how the whole world works. It's completely false. And then what really drove it home for me, it's like Jesus had the greatest information, greatest teacher ever, and he was not lecturing. He was teaching in parables and stories. So I'm just hammering home the point that stories get people to move. Stories get people to close. What's a great example of this? Ryan's story with the tenant killing the cat, right? That was one of the first stories everybody in this group heard to get them to actually move. So the next question is for private. Okay, if that's true, Jimmy, what stories do we tell? And then this is where, and I really do, one of my favorite things about Rise It Mastermind is passing on books to you guys. But this audiobook is phenomenal. I love the book so much that I hired Matthew Pollard to coach my sales team. So Matthew Pollard spoke at CG, and he riveted me because he combined Jordan Peterson with selling, two of my favorite things. And he's like, the way you sell is through telling stories, and the way you can create a sales process is through stories. So I highly recommend this audiobook for any of you guys who are nervous, feel that you're an introvert. I would definitely check out this book. So let's talk a quick second, extrovert versus introvert sales. Who here thinks extroverts are better at sales? Harold, are you extrovert or introvert?
I'm more introvert.
But you're pretty good at walking that fine line.
Yeah, well, that's because you learned how to be versatile. So, like, I know all the different personality types. Like, you're a driver. Brad's analytical. Ryan tends to be more expressive. Like Emily is more amiable. So you have to understand who you're dealing with, and then I know how to mimic people. Yeah, which is basically rapport building.
And in general, who do you think's better at sales, extroverts or introverts?
The challenge with extroverts is they can overwhelm somebody, and the challenge that they have is sometimes it's almost like a group situation. An extrovert would be helpful in an one-on-one. An introvert's probably less probably has a better shot because they're not going to steamroll somebody.
But I guess rule of thumb, do you think more introverts have self-limiting beliefs that extroverts are better salespeople?
Yeah, I would say introverts, that's the challenge, is that they're going to have to overcome mindset issues.
And then I love talking about this from an extrovert's perspective. Like, I never understood the difference between extrovert and introvert because like I never understood what introvert was. I was just like, hey, there's other people, let's go talk to them. And so like when people ask me, are you extrovert and introvert? I'm like, I have to be extrovert because I don't even understand what introvert means.
Well, here's the thing, like my wife is extrovert. And what it means to me is like she can go all day and she'll be charged up going to a meeting. I'll go to it and I'll be freaking exhausted.
Yeah. Like, so, Ryan and Brad are introverts. So we get done with Cash Flow Heaven and they're smoked. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, let's go. What else are we doing?
So you're there you go. That's how you can tell your energy when you're done. Like at a big meeting like that. Like if you're really ready to go, that charges you up. You're definitely extrovert.
But now, so here is my version of extrovert sales is you're cocky, you're used to talking to people. So my sales process used to be like, oh, I'll just walk in the room and figure this out. And it's part of the reason I hated marketing is because marketing is all about process. But I would say extrovert sales process is you run around like a chicken with your head cut off, but you tell yourself you're hustling.
Yeah.
And so it's not great. And so what?
You can overtalk. You can overtalk everybody. That's the problem.
And then some people.
And the problem is selling is not telling.
Yeah. And so some people will buy from me because they just want me to go away too. I got all kinds of hip and D sales because people knew I just wouldn't leave. So then what does it take for an introvert to be great at sales? Anybody got any thoughts on that?
They're a good listener.
Yep. Anybody else?
I'm going to guess it's part of telling a good story.
There you go. A process. And this is where Matthew Pollard's a genius. It's a process based around storytelling. And so anybody have any thought on what takes for an extrovert to be great at sales? Not good at sales, great at sales.
Energy?
Nope. That can make a good salesman.
Has to be a great storyteller.
That's part of it. I don't know. To go to good from great as a salesman. Any thoughts what you got to do?
I think it's a listening ear. Extroverts tend to talk and talk and talk, and they don't listen. I think you got to slow down and listen.
That's part of it. But so an introvert to be great at sales, they need a process based off storytelling. I would argue for an extrovert to be great at sales, they need a process based off storytelling. Because, when I would run around like this selling with no process, with no nothing, it was, it's inefficient. It's exhausting. You can't do everything. And the customer isn't as satisfied. So anybody, extrovert or introvert, needed a story-based sales process. And so then where do you derive the sales process from? From stories. This is how you get people to commit. This is how you get people to move. So, when I was a new salesperson, it was high energy and it was features and benefits. It was no stories. And so what I'm going to encourage you guys to do when you're out raising private money is to have a playbook of stories. And as Pollard continues to coach me and my team, I'll continue to drip stuff to you guys. But I would argue to be telling stories. So, for example, when I'm raising private money, I talk about my Uncle Dan. So my Uncle Dan, he was a software engineer. He was tired of software engineering. Like when he first started, he was like new to the game and he was like a pioneer, but eventually it was all outsourced to overseas. So for him to keep doing what he had to do, he had to work odd hours and he had to like pretty much work on hours in India, and it was just burning him out. His daughters were getting married. They wanted to, raise their grandkids. So he came to me and he's like, hey, Jimmy, I got $600K. I don't know what to do with it. I'd like to quit my job. He's like, should I buy some rentals? I was like, no, I think you should just lend this to me. You don't want the headache of the make readies and the tenant turns. And quite frankly, you need more time for the rentals to pay off for you. So I think you should just private lend to me. So he lent me $500,000 6 years ago at 10%. And so 4 years from now, I'm going to show up to Christmas and he's doubled. Now he's paid taxes on it. He hasn't maximized all four pillars, but he's doubled his return. And in this, volatile market, like he sleeps very well at night. So that's just an example of a playbook that I have from my experience of, somebody looking to retire and needs stable income. And I'm sure he uses this sales story all the time. And I think you guys could use the same thing. Does that kind of make sense what I'm saying? Where I think you guys can find a ton of money is creating some type of self-directed IRA story. So I knew Tom, he had wanted to get off the chaos of the stock market. And so he put all his money in a self-directed IRA. The only problem with self-directed IRAs is then once it's in the self-directed IRA, he was looking for a deal. And so what I was able to do to him is bring him the actual deal. So now Tom, he's happy with his decision to go to a more self-directed IRA. And then for me, he's getting an 8 to 10% return constantly over and over again. If you have a rich uncle, like Uncle Scrooge, same thing. Uncle Scrooge, he had hustled his whole life. He didn't want to put his money on the market. So he didn't know where to go with it. So I said, hey, why not take this money, give it above market return, protect it in real estate, and you either get or you get. So, you're a rich guy, Uncle Scrooge. You'd like to own houses anyway, wouldn't you? He's like, sure. So why don't you take a flyer with me and lend me some money? And so I was thinking a good use of this time would be any objections you guys have heard, you guys could start crafting stories towards those objections to private money. Or guys, have you heard any objections yet when it comes to raising private money?
Can I ask you a question? So as I'm listening to you, somehow I pictured Lee Arnold when he was delivering all his slides, and this person is holding this check, and it felt a little, at the time, it felt a little salesy. How do you work?
Well, the first 3 slides were not salesy.
Right, but
The first 2 were not
usually,
salesy.
like the next 10. So you just do a little bit? Is that what you're saying?
I would say one example. So what we're doing for wholesaling is we're just going through our most common sales objections and just creating stories that talk about how another client of ours or another seller of ours worked through that objection. So I agree with you. I wouldn't sit there listing the 20 private lenders who are happy with you. I would get one story for one objection.
One thing that helped me, and it's kind of exactly what you're saying. I was dealing with having a lot of difficulty negotiating with partners in my corporation. And I talked to this kind of master investor, multimillionaire guy. And he told me, he said, your problem is you were trying to get people to buy the things the way that you want them to buy it. When really what you need to do is figure out how they want to buy it. You're trying to figure out, you want to sell it in the way you want to sell it, but really you need to figure out the way that they want to buy it and take the time to understand the points that matter to them and emphasize those points. And you'll probably learn more about what's good about your deal or what's good about the thing that you're offering by understanding it from their perspective, how it will be beneficial to them.
I can't agree more. Like a salesperson is when you're selling, you're really just solving problems. Like God knows how many loans Peter and Emily sold today, but they solved the problem of how do I get my money back faster? So sales is all about solving problems. So you kind of want to have a story created about solving problems, but it's the other person's problem, not your own. Like Armand, what do you think finally got your parents over the hump?
It was clarity around the refinancing. It was that whole idea of I had to actually spell out that, you're creating value through having the after repair value added in, and they didn't understand that it's like you're literally creating value in the market and taking it out and being able to take advantage of financing from that. So once I was able to extrapolate or expand information around that, they were okay.
And then what are your parents' names?
Kenneth and Linda.
So the next buyer, the next lender who has that same issue. I had a client named Ken, and they just didn't get it. They just didn't get how this created a win for anybody. So I just had to lay out this simple graphic that, hey, the value is created when the house is bought and in the rehab, if you can do it in an economic fashion. Value is created there. And then Ken's next concern was how would he ever get his cash out of this deal? And then that's in the refinance part of the cycle. You see right there, that's how he gets his cash back. And then how is this a great long-term investment? Ken was wondering. I just showed him that we repeat this process over and over and over again. And then a great point Matt Pollard made is no one argues with stories. People will argue with features and benefits. I could get this return at this stock market, but no one's going to argue that my Uncle Dan isn't a happy, satisfied guy taking care of his grandkids and not worrying about his nest egg.
Hey, Jimmy, just last weekend with my brother-in-law, my approach was I actually just went through my story of, all the stuff that I've had to do, like setting up LLCs and, going out and meeting with turnkey companies and, getting in this program with you. It kind of walked through the whole process and, everything that goes along with getting rental properties. And my brother-in-law was like, hey, yeah, I'm really interested in that, but I just don't have the time to do all that right now. And I said, well, if you're just looking to invest, like you can give me some money, it's a win for you. You'll get some money on top of what you just have sitting there, and I'll get a property, right? So it's a win for both of us. And he was like, yeah, totally. Like that's what I want to do right now. Cause he's a new doctor. He doesn't have time to like look into all this. And so anyway, just telling him what I went through, the story actually sold him on the process.
Not return rates?
No, he didn't care about that. He's just like, yeah, like I just want to be able to have somewhere where I can make money right now and not put a lot of time into it myself. So
awesome.
So here's a question. So I had somebody ping me on Instagram the other day and say, so what's this private lending stuff? So it wasn't a conversation. It was, via messaging on Instagram. And so I gave a quick synopsis and gave said, happy to talk with you, happy to send you my, I have a presentation on this. Now, I didn't hear back from that person, and who knows why, right? They could be thinking about it. They could be, oh, that's not something I'm interested in. I mean, who knows, right? There's 1,000 different things that could be. But should I have handled that differently?
Then just DMing them back?
Yeah, I mean,
the initial thing that came to my mind is, have you recorded yourself going through your deck?
Not yet. No, it's on my list, but I have not done that yet.
I would do an 8-minute video and then have a recording and be like, hey, check it out.
The Loom videos work fantastic.
A video would be awesome. And like, did you know this person was just random?
I know them.
Okay.
I mean, another thought that comes to me is, just briefly saying, you know what, it's kind of hard to explain in DM. Can we set up a time to call and just try to get them on the phone, right away if you can commit, get them to, and they may not respond to that either, but which tells you how serious they are. But I don't know. It's hard to weed out the tire kickers from people that are legitimately interested. So sometimes it's good to just, get them on the phone.
And if you could possibly even, if there's someone, like I've had some success with people from high school reaching out, and I use it as an opportunity just to say, hey, I haven't seen you in years. I'd love to catch up. Let me go buy you lunch. And I feel like if you can get that face-to-face with them, you have such a better chance than through, the Instagram's the lead, the Facebook's the lead, but the close is in that like one-on-one person where they can sit there and like look at your facial expressions. It's
Yeah.
the same. So.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, can I just share my experience? Sort of both major topics of today's conversation. So I went home and worked on a pitch deck, and then went and shared it with my brother. And in the effort of trying to solve problems, he's got some cash that he just has in like high yield checking account or something, making 4% or whatever, 5%. And so my initial pitch was like, gosh, look, I'll pay 8%, and I kind of took him through the pitch deck and the Berkey process and so on, and he was pretty excited about that. But just in talking to him, I couldn't help myself just sharing my excitement about real estate in general and about what I've been doing and about cash flow tactics and kind of bigger picture, And so I originally set up, our initial plan was he was going to lend me some money, but he called me back later and said, well, I want to learn more about how to do what you're doing. How can I own some rental properties? And so our conversation kind of shifted, and fortunately it was good timing. I talked to Peter about this, and Emily's helping me. So I've kind of switched directions, and I decided what I'm going to do is be the lender. I'm going to borrow some money from a HELOC. I'm going to give it to my brother. He's going to buy a turnkey property, Jimmy. It's going to close on Monday. Then we're going to kind of go through the process of refinancing. The advantage of him doing it is that he's going to do a Fannie Freddie loan on it. If I was going to own the house, I'd have to do a DSCR loan, right? So we're going to get better rates, less fees, and still get a quick turnaround. And then in return, I'm going to lend him that money. He's going to pay me interest. It'll pay my HELOC interest. So I'll break even. At the end of the deal, I won't have any of my own money in the house. He will have put in some money of his own, and we'll split the house 50-50. And then if we could do that 2 or 3 times a year, then we're going to build a portfolio together. I'm going to be able to teach him as we go how to do the real estate, what I'm doing. So he's all excited about learning how to do it, actually doing it, but with a guide. And so it's kind of a win-win situation. So for me, what worked is just honestly my sincerity about how excited I was about what's possible, And so, it's pretty cool to see what's going to happen.
That's awesome, bro. And then the other thing the Introvert's Edge pointed out to me, it's that, you think introverts are like, don't like people. It's not that introverts don't like people. They hate small talk. And so just having stories too instantly gets through that small talk barrier, because now introverts generally like to speak about things that are substantive. So sure, private lending stories isn't like the most deep thing you've ever talked about, but at least it breaks through the small talk shenanigans.
what I'm struggling with is that everyone around me is so bought into Wall Street and this is the only way to go that like I find it difficult to find people that think a little bit differently. I don't know if anyone else is dealing with this because, you know, you can be all excited and you can be sharing what you're doing and whatnot, and people look at you like you have three eyes. So that this is one of the reasons why I adore this community, because like people get you, but like so much, like even like people that I'm very close with, they're like, okay, go away. We don't understand this. And like, you're very strange with this stuff. So I don't know if anybody else is experiencing this.
I experience it every day. You know, I doubt this will ever be a majority opinion. Like that was in the beginning, that was like our goal. Like this just needs to be, every American needs to understand that. But you know, I do think there's 10% of the people interacting with you, Lana, that would get it, but it is never going to be a majority thing.
I have a question for the group real quick. So I'm struggling I mean, I found one person so far to raise the larger capital, but I am finding smaller amounts of money from different people. A lot of times it's like firefighters. Hey, I have 25 grand. Like what's a strategy in that sense? Because I don't want to partner with multiple people on one project. I kind of was advised through you guys, but is there something, this one guy came to me, he's like, hey, look, he's going to start getting money out of his retirement account. He's going to be forced to take it. He's like, I'll be able to get you 25 grand like every 6 months or every year. And if this goes well, I'll continue just reinvesting that for the 8 to 10%. I just stuck at where to put that in the plan. I mean, I don't want to turn down money, but you know, he can't afford to go higher than that at the moment.
So that would work on sub 2 deals, I think. I could show you an example of that, but I would just always keep him at bay. Be like, hey, I don't have anything right now, 25, but let me see what I could do.
The other thought is, Brian, if it's every 6 months he's taking 25 grand out, have him wait for 12 and give you 50, you know, and buy a deal, you know, and just say, hey, this is kind of where I'm finding these properties. You need $40,000 for down payment or $30,000 or whatever it is, and closing costs and reserves. Let's get you one every year and slow him down. And then maybe once he's drunk Kool-Aid, he'll find ways to get you a little more cash quicker.
So you're saying instead of doing the Berkey, do more of like take that as a down payment towards a.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Yeah, but how do you get him paid back off? Because you don't really have built-in equity. You're not going to refinance that probably, or it's going to take longer to refinance it or to have equity to pull back out. So how do you pay that investor off?
Yeah, so you know, you're looking at the way I would do it is 50 grand, 8% is $4,000 a year. $4,000 a year is $300 a month. I'm setting up a loan to where, you know, if I go and buy a Berkey, or excuse me, a typical turnkey from Jimmy, I'm going to pull $300 from that turnkey deal each and every month to pay him back. It's just going to be secondary financing for the down payment. You need it to cash flow ideally, but even if it doesn't cash flow, you're still getting all of the other benefits of the real estate, owning the real estate. You just got to make sure that that's figured out. It needs to be a line item in the calculation on that perform on that property. So you're just going to go get a loan at 50 grand from him for a down payment, and you guarantee him an 8% return on his money. And then you're on the hook for that 8% on the 50 grand, but now you just bought a property with zero down.
I think she's asking about like normally we're paying back these lenders within a year at that point.
Yeah. And so then you do a cash out refinance or something down the road. Once you have equity, you know, enough equity in that property with principal pay down appreciation that you could go cash them out, pay them off. But maybe
the other thing I would do, Brian, is like you're going to make 25K to invest in a short period of time. You're accelerating your acquisitions. So I would maybe just even pay them off with cash as it comes in.
What about that too? Like as I'm saving in my vaults for a new property, just pull that out when the term comes done.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
You just set up a structure where you're going to guarantee him something and say, hey, I'll pay you off faster if I can, but over the course of X period of time, I'll pay you off at a guaranteed 8% return on your money.
So we got 5 minutes left. I appreciate your guys' time and attention staying with us this long. Leah, you had a pretty compelling question on a house that Harold's under contract to buy. Do you guys want to go through this as a case study, or are we spent?
Sure.
No, let's go through it.
Yeah, how should we? I want to show the visual. Christy, do you want to bring up what you sent out?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me know if you have screen sharing. So, all right, Leah, I am going to. Do you want to ask your question, or do you want me to read off your question to the group?
You probably have all the numbers, so go ahead.
Okay. All right, so this is from Leah. So let's use the recent tired landlord deal you sent. If I take a private lender at 125K, 90 for the purchase, 35 for the rehab. By the way, gang, this is a tired landlord deal. Christy, more than the pro forma, can you bring up the pictures and whatnot? So private lender 125, 90 for the purchase, 35 for the rehab. And we just use these numbers and pretend that this is a burr. If the ARV is 140, for someone like me who's doing non-QM loans, my closing costs are more expensive. So I plan on 75% out at the max, 105K back after the cash out refi, assuming it praises out 140. So I really need to come down to the table with 20K of my own money. And I believe I would need to have another 10 to 30 in reserves in case the appraisal is way off. Finally, I would also need to have 8,400 to 10,000 set aside for interest payments in the event the house is vacant and or the tenant is not paying. I get 8,400 to 10K depending on if I take a private loan for 105 or 125. Am I thinking about this right? So let's take a look at so here's the numbers, guys. The house currently occupied at 1,300. Tenants month to month, ready to renew another lease. All new windows have been bought, but not installed. And I believe they're getting installed before you purchase, right, Harold?
Yes.
And then same with the shower surround. So what is your purchase price, Harold?
90,000.
And then now the rehab is, so
If the tenant moves out, I don't have any rehab.
yeah, ethically, I feel like we give you guys on tired landlord deals, we give you guys the worst case scenario if you wanted to rehab it and sell.
I
it.
thought you were high. I looked at it, I go, oh, you're a little high. When I looked at all the photos, you sent me all the photos and I went through it and I go, he's 35. That's a little high. I think he's 20, 25, but numbers make sense. I like the property as a 3 and 2, check box. I was fine with the C+ neighborhood, check box, reserved it. That's how I looked at it real quick.
And so I just want you guys to know that, like, we live in fear of, the tenant moves out and say it's a 30, like, Harold, this person moves out and we send you a bid for a $20,000 make ready. You're going to be like, oh, Jimmy, you only told me 35. I love you. So on these tired landlord deals, we're always overestimating.
Right.
So I think you're thinking, Leah, is on tired landlord deals, thinking you got to do the 35K rehab.
Well, but the question is even if it's 20, so let's just say I take a private investor loan for 100 or for the 90, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So then the guy decides to move out the next month or 6 months later or a year later, then I'm still on the hook to be able to come up with somewhere between 20 and 35 for the rehab.
Yep. Go back to those pictures, please, Christy.
It's not so much that, it's more of I'm asking the question from a numbers perspective, right? Because, my capital, it is, very tight. My personal capital is very tight. And so I'm looking at, I'm not getting, if I take a private loan, I'm not getting all of the money back from the ARV unless the ARV, it praises way higher than projected.
Yeah. I would suspect that it would appraise higher beyond this one. So I just use my HELOC, some of my HELOC money, and I go, I've had it sitting there and waiting for some other things, some other things to happen. But my personal take is at $1,300 a month rent, probably I think it'll probably appraise at 120 easy, even in the condition that it's in. That's my gut looking at it, going, if I got a lease for, and they look at the rental and even the floors are done, so the kitchen's pretty decent. It just got a few dings in the drywall, which is like, that's like paint and some sanding and stuff like that. Super easy stuff. I don't know why the plumbing is showing up, but I'm guessing there's some plumbing stuff that has to be managed at some point. But
that's not my point, right?
Yeah.
My point is that if I'm looking from a cash management and a reserves perspective, right? If unless I'm missing something, okay, maybe I just blow off not blow off, but not worry about the rehab and figure that out when it happens. But I'm not really a figure it out so much when it happens kind of girl. So my perspective is that to make sure that I have enough reserves, I need to bring some of my own money to the table potentially if it does not, when I do a cash out refi, it does not it does not appraise, because then I'm going to need to pay my investor back. And as with really any other property, but more so, this is more critical, I think, for me, because if I'm borrowing money from somebody else, I need to make sure that I'm paying that person back. And so if I have a tenant that decides to not pay, or they move out, or it's vacant for a long time while it's being rehabbed, I have to be able to bankroll that interest payments. So it was more of a question of reserves and making sure that I have the financial.
It's just wrapping up, yeah. So
Hold on, let me do Peter.
Where you
Go ahead,
headed?
Leah.
Yeah,
Peter,
so-
mute yourself.
So, I mean, it's more of a
Yeah.
question
so
of,
it's through the Welch.
Christy, I think you own this call. Can you mute Peter?
He's good.
Okay.
it's not so much that this is a good or bad property. It looked like a great property. I just used these numbers because I thought they were very realistic to figure out like the reality of, I mean, because in the past, right, I've just used my cash and it was not a big deal, but I don't have those same reserve. I don't have that same just extra cash laying around like I used to. So I have to look at money very differently now. So as I look at how many private investors can I take on at any one time, it really drives back to reserve. So I'm really just talking out loud to have you guys say, am I way off base or am I completely on base? Because if every private investor I take on, I may have a potential delta of what the ARV ultimately is, appraisal, gap or not. That also limits how many private deals I can do in any one duration. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, how did you work through it?
Well, he's got cash, so it's
Yeah,
not.
I mean, I have money in the
Yeah.
vault as well. So I do have reserves. I have plenty of cash to manage the situation. So if it doesn't, if the tenant moves out right away, but it looks like
Right.
the tenant's gonna stay for a year, so I'll, at some
Like,
point, I'll do
yeah,
refi.
are you asking what I would be thinking, Leah, or the group, or who are you asking?
Yeah, I mean, what would you be thinking? I mean, it's one thing, if you have plenty of cash, then it's a non-issue. That's how it used to be. That's not my case anymore, so.
Yeah.
Right.
So you always have to be cautious of reserves, but like these private lenders want their money out. So let's say, I mean, really, a make ready on that, I think it's going to be less than 10 grand. What I would do is I would just borrow the money for the make ready and then pay them back because they want their money out. And like my own portfolio, I used all private money to build mine. I've since refied it out because I wanted some equity pay down. But in that time when I couldn't, like the appreciation, like it made it a better deal for the lender. So I agree with you. I don't think you can go do 100 of these, but it comes down to personal preference on how much you want in reserve.
Right, well,
So-
that's always the question, right? Because I have to have reserves for the rest of the portfolio and the little surprises that come up. So, yeah. And I'm a non-QM I'm either when I cash out refi, I'm a non-QM. So it's always going to be a little bit different.
But
Well, so Jimmy, here's the question then. So let's say, Leah does the cash out refi, gets her first trustee, her hard money people paid off, right?
yeah,
Then a year from now, the tenant moves out. She's got 25 grand that she's got to do in fixing, just for argument's sake, let's just say it's 25
Yeah.
grand. So what you're saying is she could go get hard money and a second and say, look, same deal. We pay a little higher interest rate and then we do a refi and take them out. Has that been looked into? Is that something Emily and Peter can?
then I would call Brian Waters guy who's only got 25 grand. I borrowed from him.
But there you go, right? Is there somebody else? But right. So is there somebody else that she can lend and then she can do a refi out of at that point, or what?
Yeah, I'll lend it to you personally.
Yeah, like you're never dead in the water. So I guess Lee,
Hey, how are you?
Have you
Good. How was
said-
your trip to the Gulf?
have you said, hey, I will have this amount of reserves for every house?
I have my reserves they're not built for every house. They kind of take a rule of
Yeah,
thumb that
there you
Brad
go.
put together a long time ago.
No, that's true.
and then,
we reached a lot of
I have
house
personal reserves put in there.
because of your lot.
So I'm super solid with reserves, but I mean, I've had those bad years where it was obscenely expensive. And so I've had that year that scared the living crap out of me of like, holy crap. I mean, if I had a second year like that, I mean, that would really take, that could probably not knock me out of the game, but pretty close.
Yes,
So
I
that
think you and Harold might just be in different situations. Like every deal is not going to be for everybody.
All right. Well, I'm just trying to work through it. So thanks for that. I'll think through it more.
Yeah, let me know if there's anything I can do to help give you some clarity.
So
This is a
you know
fun
what?
too. So go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to tell you, there's a one of the things that I'll do if I do, I role play with one of my agents, and there's one way to bring out emotion to somebody. If you want to tap into their emotion, there's 3 questions you should always ask, and is, you know, what's important about blank? So what's important about you getting interest, right? And how's that important to you? Well, blah blah blah. They're going to say whatever it is. How that, and so once you understand, well, how's that, and so ultimately, you know, what will all this do for you? So you're going to ask those 3 questions: what's important, how's important, ultimately, what's all this going to do for you? When you ask the 3rd question, it will always evoke emotion, and that's what you want. That's that's a Tony Robbins sequence that's taught of how to get emotion out of people. And then they can make a decision, because now you go, wow, you know, and then you can even say, isn't that a great feeling? Well, fortunately, to get you one step closer to making that happen, let's kind of go through a deck, and I can show you exactly how that's possible, which is like you said, making justify the logic side of the emotion. Anyway, throw that in there for free.
Thank you, Harold. Well, gang, you guys, I appreciate your time and attention for the last 2 hours and 10 minutes. This was fun. Peter, thank you for the share for the group. Really appreciate it. I know the whole group does. And a great call, guys. And we will talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Jimmy.
Yeah.
The call is on this link. Give me 5 minutes. Because I gotta hang up so that this thing records, and I'm sure you don't want your decade and day call going to the whole community. So give me 5 minutes. All right. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Yeah.